Happy Wednesday. Happy Mind Your Wednesday. I'm gonna have to be a little transparent and kind of talk about myself in not the best light, if you will. Nothing terrible, but I found myself feeling a little defeated the other day. Not even a little bit, a lot defeated. I was in physical therapy, and I think maybe a month and a half ago, I was talking about how when I first started therapy, my therapist mentioned that we would work on range of motion and mobility, and then we'd start working on the strengthening later down the line. So range of motion's been great. Been able to move my shoulder without much issue. So now he's gradually pushing into the strengthening exercises. Now, going into this process, of course, I didn't really have a point of reference as to what the recovery was going to be, but I just knew it would be longer. I didn't know, I guess, the depth of everything that I would need to be doing during recovery. And last week, there was another therapist there because mine was out of town. So she kept making references or comments about how bad the recovery of shoulder surgery or the surgery that I had can be or has been for a lot of people. And even so much so, she said that I would prefer having both of my knee surgeries done again at the same time before I would have the surgery that you had. I go, okay. I was like, that's pretty deep. And up until this point, in my mind, I'm thinking, the pain hasn't really been that bad. Some of the activities or the exercises I've been doing in physical therapy haven't been terrible. Yes, I've cried a couple of times, but hadn't been awful. Not the way she was describing it. Like, now, would I want to do this again? No. But has it been horrific? No, not so much. So, but I kept thinking about that. And I'm like, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just because in my mind, I didn't think about it being a horrible recovery, or I never allowed myself to think that it would be a really difficult recovery. And then I started thinking about it after she said it. I mean, and she was a very talkative PT, but then she kept kind of talking about it and was like, oh, you're doing great. Usually people at this point, I mean, they're just getting to a point where they can do this or do that. Like, okay. But what I made the mistake of doing was I started to Google. Now, Google is not your friend. Last week I was talking about side effects. And, what do? I go on Google to see, look and see or read about things about the recovery from shoulder surgery. And so now it's in my head. Well, maybe it should be a little more painful or a little more difficult. Or maybe I do have a longer way to go in recovery than I initially thought. And so I allowed that one conversation to kind of start playing over in my head. And guess what happened? My shoulder started hurting more than it had been this whole time. Started aching a little more. Didn't really need much pain meds or medication. Took it twice more the last few days. Went back and my regular therapist had come back and he was introducing some exercises. And this is where I started to feel defeated. He wanted me to do or try some strengthening exercises, but I wasn't able to hold the position to do it. And I'm pretty competitive, so I like to make steady progress and grow. And the fact that he thought I was at a point where I should have been ready to do this and I wasn't was a tad bit defeating to me. And so, I literally had a whole little pity party, with myself. Like, this is just unacceptable. And why aren't you here? And why haven't you done that? And why aren't you able to do this? And I had to get myself together. I had to call in some reinforcement and get my mind back on track. But I said all of that to say that a lot of times when we have our mind made up on a thing, or we're determined to stay on a steady trajectory to get to a goal, and we allow that one little thought, and a lot of times it's yourself telling you, or you're hearing that little inner voice that's not God, but it's you telling you, well, maybe you can't really do that, or maybe you may not make it there, or a relative or a friend, and they just plant that little bit of seed of doubt, or cause you to rethink something that you were so set on, and then you subtly start manifesting that thing. And I'm pretty sure that that's what I did. I started thinking, well, ooh, maybe it will get more difficult, or maybe I'm just really getting into the hard part of it. And it happened. So now I have to will myself and my mind back to a space where, no, you're still going to have to go through this process, but I can change my mindset back to, I can still achieve and accomplish. It's not going to be that difficult. You just have to do what it is He's giving you to do. You will have to push yourself a little bit harder to get there, but you can do it. So just stay mindful of those little bitty seeds that people can plant. And before you know it, it done trickled into something so much bigger, because we didn't nip it in the bud when we first heard it. Because I was just like, I never thought that. Or, well, I guess, I didn't know. So I'm accepting somebody else's word about something that I'm dealing with in my life. Right? Be careful about that. Who you're listening to, who's around you, who you're talking to, and stay in your own mental space to achieve what it is that you need to achieve for yourself. We all know how we need to hear a thing, what we need to do to motivate ourselves. I was talking to a friend of mine about staying in a self-care bubble sometimes. And you need to keep yourself in the bubble in order to stay on the path and not be distracted. So be mindful. It can be real subtle, and it can take a few days, and then you realize, how did I get here? Pay attention. Pay attention. Don't allow yourself to be defeated, especially if you weren't headed in that direction. Take it from me. It is not a fun place to be, and it wasn't for me. I still got a little ways to go on this recovery, but my mind is made up. I'm going to stay focused. My will is great. I'm determined to get through this and get to the other side, and so can you. So, as I always say, if nobody's told you today that they love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. Guys, be a great day. Enjoy the rest of your day and continue to mind your Wednesday. See you next week.